cases are different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
Oh, a little...
Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
So, the snow is blowing, the geese are flying. I noticed that on the way here. 540-0580. I love that song. Jack, we're going to start with you right on the air, right off the bat, brother. What's going on?
All right. Hey, thanks, Carl. I have a question about the legality of recording meetings in a professional setting.
Okay.
Take the example of a board meeting. Is it legal to record a meeting? And if it is, must everybody be made aware and also in agreement?
In Pennsylvania, it's a little complicated, but we're not talking wiretapping here. We're just recording of oral, not the O-R-A-L, which is where the oral sounds come from, but the A word, oral. Interceptions would be the recording of sounds made by people, i.e. their voices, through the air. And to do it without their consent is illegal and a felony in Pennsylvania if they have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the area. So a board meeting, for instance, I think anything you say, the question is, what's your expectation of privacy at that meeting? And so courts have held, for instance, that I can record the police officer secretly because he's a public servant doing a public duty, and he has no expectation of privacy in that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's serendipitous. What am I thinking of? Surreptitiously. Anyhow, you know what I mean. Secretly recording. So that's also happened when a chief of police was intercepting by turning on the recorders in the break room on the phones so he could hear through the phone system into his office what the officers were saying about him. That was held by our Commonwealth Court not to be a violation as well. So, on the other hand, if you have a custody exchange and somebody comes over to your house, and when they come into the house you have a recorder running secretly, we know that that's a felony to intercept that, okay? So in that context, I guess we have to decide at this public meeting or closed meeting, how public or what's the expectation of privacy in it. So, for instance, if notes are being taken or minutes are being taken of the meeting, then we'd argue that there's no expectation of privacy, right?
Right.
If, on the other hand, it's an executive session, which are supposed to be kept, closed, maybe there is an expectation of privacy. The safest way to do it would simply say this meeting can be and would be or possibly be recorded. And then you're okay. But you have to be really careful because once you violate the Wiretap Act, make this interception, then it becomes a felony each time you play it as well. And it's not admissible in court. So even if you've got this great evidence, people show up in the office every once in a while and they're like, I taped that dirty SOB saying blah, 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 blah. And you're like, well, slow down. Don't hand me the tape. Don't show me the tape. And you can't destroy the tape. But let me ask you this question. Are you saying you taped somebody secretly? Yeah. Well, you can't use it. It doesn't matter what they said. It's not admissible at all. So there's no advantage to taping it either if it was illegal to tape. You see what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So
it's helpful because there's both board meetings and there are executive meetings that you reference, and they are, in our opinion, a little different.
Right. So that's my thought on the matter is what your expectation of privacy is in that. Now, a public official at a public meeting probably is like the police officer, right? On the other hand, if two police officers go back into leave the interrogation room to exchange information on active criminal investigation, that's probably not a public document or public discussion that they're going to create or do because it's part of a criminal investigation. So that conversation for that purpose may not have be without some expectation of privacy between the police officers. So I don't know. Because the one case was the break room. Think about it. So, the break room's not really it would be interesting if the court would have found it significant if it was, the interrogation room. Of course, we all know there's a recorder in there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my friend, good luck.
Thank you.
540-0580, Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. Go to romingerlaw.com if you want to learn more about us. At 2 o'clock, I'm going to have Glenn Yoder on, and he's going to talk about property management, rentals, and what a property manager does, what you might use them for. So if you're someone who owns some rentals, wants to own some rentals, or just want to know why A property manager is good to have with a commercial property or with rental properties. Glenn Yoder from Coldwell Banker Select Professionals will be on 2 o'clock. So you want to tell your friends or message somebody and let them know right away so that they know to come on. Of course, if you guys have a Super Bowl prediction or two, I'll always take those on the air here, too. We'll tally up what we get. I know Shane's a huge Ravens fan and is rooting. He's laughing at me. Bandwagon jumper, you. He's got nothing to say. 540-0580 if you want to talk about anything law-related. What's going on in Pennsylvania right now? Let's see. The governor's son's under investigation because I never thought any police officer ever did this. He searched somebody's car and took some of the funds that were supposed to be searched for a drug search, apparently $141 or something, and it mysteriously ended up in his pocket, according to the reports that are filtering out. I'm only reporting what I've heard. There's been a theory amongst the defense lawyers over the years. We get clients in and they say, I had $800 on me, but for some reason only $522 made it to evidence. And sometimes you think maybe the client's lying, but then you start to notice that, certain people have done the search. It seems like a disproportionate percentage of your clients find a discrepancy. Now, sometimes it's drug money, sometimes it's not, but the point is there does seem to be a problem, and that's why the police actively police themselves in that area, because it's very tempting for officers to do that. And I assure you most don't. But nonetheless, the governor's son-in-law apparently has got himself in some hot water with the FBI and a sting down in Philly. In the meantime, Madam Justice Ori, currently suspended from her $195,000 a year job as a justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, is in trial out in Pittsburgh. And her defense team was trying to unseal and was successful in unsealing some federal records involving one of the witnesses' lawsuits over contracting herpes, because apparently they're going to try to cross-examine the witness on her lawsuit over herpes. And they've got to convince the federal judge to open that up. So I guess Pennsylvania court system's reached an all-time low in some respects when one of our justices' defense is to smear one of the witnesses with herpes. 540-0580. Rick, you're on the air.
Hi, Carl. Recently, I got a letter from a collection agent. This has to do with local or county taxes.
Yeah.
And my question is going to be, what does and what does not constitute legally proof of payment? And what I'm saying is that we owed the $10 tax up in Perry County, my wife and I, it ended up that I thought it was the head tax for the school district, and I was actually wrong. It was the county tax, and somehow we forgot to pay it. So we have a bill for $29 saying due now with a threat implied. And when I called them and said, look, we have photocopies of the checks, even though it turned out not to be the correct ones, the girl told me on the phone, we don't accept that as proof. And I said, well, what do you accept as proof, if not the copy of a canceled check with a bank stamp across it? And she said, well, you have to apply for a receipt. I said, I never heard of such a thing. You know what? I paid the tax, or I thought I did. I have copies of the check. It's got the bank on it that the check was sent to. What do you want from me? So my question to you, Carl, is do these agencies take liberties with what they can declare are legal and illegal or non-admissible sources of identity or proof of
something? Well, here's the answer. Absent a statute that regulates that, or regulation, I'm unaware of anything exactly along those lines. A court, if you said to them, mark this tax due, or they tried to prosecute you or collect it, you may be able to defend and show that you paid it, and a judge would look at it and find it to be sufficient proof of payment. But the bureaucrats can sort of just say, this is our version of sufficient proof of payment, and a canceled check is not something we'll accept. I don't know why that is. I
was thinking, maybe they think we sit out there now, we figured out how to forge proof of payment for $10 taxes. I'm going to wait. But the fact that they said it, I just wanted to say, I thought, if a judge is going to probably accept that, who are these people to tell me they're not going to accept?
Here's what they're going to do, right? They're going to tell you, no, you have to. Now, this is my favorite part about it. She wasn't saying they wouldn't accept it. She's saying you have to apply for a receipt. So what they're going to do is look at the check, say this check is good. Okay, we'll give you a receipt. Now hand us the receipt back, and you'll have satisfied your proof of payment. Now, can you see the whole extra step in there?
Do they charge for that?
Well, I was just going to say, the next thing you're going to find out is that in order to apply for a receipt, there's an additional $15 fee, right?
Yeah.
I mean, ridiculous. I think you're absolutely listen, here's the question. How many headaches do you want, and do you really want to have the great standoff? And this is the problem. That's why City Hall kills you with 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much.
All right, brother. 540-0580. Got to go to break. When we come back, we'll talk about that Philadelphia traffic court. Welcome back. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. So remember we were talking about the justice in Pittsburgh. Well, what made me think of Philadelphia, and the snow's starting to accumulate out there. What made me think of Philadelphia was the traffic court down there. Apparently some kind of big federal sting where a lot of the traffic court judges are in trouble because apparently there was 2 tiers of justice in Philadelphia. There's, the regular Philadelphian and Pennsylvanian and out-of-towner, and then there was the politically connected. And so your traffic tickets were handled on kind of like a 2-tier system depending on who you were. Now, whoever thought that was going on in Philadelphia? I mean, craziness. And remember, we always get those crazy tickets up here from the traffic court where people say that they get a ticket from Philadelphia claiming their car was down there. And, of course, those courts down there do absolutely nothing but threaten to suspend your driver's license unless you send them the money. So apparently they're cleaning house, and almost the entire court is in trouble, according to the news articles. So look up the Philadelphia traffic court on Google. Look up Justice Ori on Google if you want to read about the latest Pennsylvania justice, or look up Corbett's son. Anyhow, very interesting, kind of a dark week here for Pennsylvania justice. Bill, you're on the air.
Hey, Carl.
Hey.
Hey, I have a question. 2 years ago, my daughter was in an accident where she was making a left-hand turn, and apparently the guy didn't see her, or lady didn't see her, and took off her driver's side mirror. Cars could drive away. The police were called, and when the police got there, the lady said she wanted an ambulance and so forth. So about a week ago, I get a subpoena in the mail saying my daughter and I were being sued, and it was a letter from, I called my insurance company,
right.
And they said, we found out about that 2 years ago. They're just refiling because they're a 2-year limit. We denied her. Obviously, she's out for a paycheck, blah, blah, blah. And don't worry because you have adequate coverage.
Right.
Well, yesterday I get a thing in the mail saying now that she's suing more for my coverage, and they're advising me to maybe, I don't have to, but maybe get an attorney because I'll be liable for any fees over my amount. So I don't know how this all, this is like crazy.
Here's what's going on. First of all, she filed what's called a writ.
Okay.
And a writ stops the statute of limitations. So I've had clients before who blow it. They think that by writing letters back and forth to the insurance company for 2.5 years, they're okay. But once you get past 2 years, you got to file this magic court paperwork.
Okay.
Once they file that, you're on notice of the lawsuit. You have the right to compel them to do a complaint, and your insurance company is going to cover you up to your policy limit, and they're going to provide a lawyer to you to do your cost of defense. However, when the other side demands more than the policy limit, there's a divergence of interest between the insurance company and you, or at least potentially. So let me give you a hypothetical. There's $50,000 in damages, and you have a $15,000 policy, and the other side's demanding, $50,000, and they don't want to accept the policy. Well, that could implicate your personal estate, your own possessions, your house, things like that. So the insurance company's going to say to you, hey, we'll defend it, and we'll pay up to $15,000, but you might want to have your own lawyer on this because at the end of the day, we're only on the hook for $15,000. So the worst thing that's going to happen to us is we're going to be out $15,000, but you might be out a lot more if somebody doesn't settle this or work it out. On the other hand, imagine that the other person's actual damages are $15,000 and you have a $50,000 policy, but their lawyer demands $100,000. The insurance company still has to do the same thing and send you that letter because the other side's asking for $100,000. They're not going to get it, and they can't get it, and their damages are worth a lot less than your policy. But because of the potential divergence of interest, because let's just say let's say the insurance company goes, we're not settling this ever, no how, and we're going to litigate it to the end, and then for some reason a crazy jury awards $1 million. Well, you'd want your lawyer to have been in there saying, now, wait a minute, we need to straighten this out. So there's a divergence of interest, but realistically, most of the time when people come in and see me when the insurance company said that, what I end up doing is contacting the insurance company lawyer and saying, where are we really at here? And usually they tell me, it's just precautionary because, they're making a crazy claim. But every once in a while, the insurance company lawyer says, yeah, well, this is a colorable one, and, there might be some damages. And then I sit down with you and we go, okay, do you have a wife? Are you married? Is your house jointly titled, et cetera, et cetera? We look at your true vulnerability to a judgment to decide what to do. And then usually all I do is sit back and monitor it. Don't do any active work unless I think the insurance company is doing something crazy.
Yeah.
So that's the first question would be, is there really any real damage? What you're telling me, this doesn't sound like a very dramatic accident.
No, she was making a left, and the lady, I guess, wanted to go around her, and so they sideswiped. And like I said, she drove the estimate to my daughter's car was basically the driver's side mirror and the fender, and she drove it home.
Right.
And she had like three other her girlfriends were in the car saying, this lady was coming up fast and just totally never saw her. Just went
around her.
And when the police came, and she would jump up and down, yelling at my daughter, saying, what were you doing? And my daughter was like, you hit me. And then when the cops came, she said, I need an ambulance, and sat down on the ground. And
right. Well,
so,
it sounds like a bogus style lawsuit. There's a lot of non-frivolous lawsuits out there, but there are some people who determined because they were in a little fender bender that they were terribly injured.
Right.
And that sounds like the behavior. It also sounds like you're going to win on the liability issues.
Yeah, because I was reading a report that it was saying that my daughter willfully drove her car into her. I'm thinking, what 19-year-old kid willfully drives a car into somebody, especially when they're... Was
that the complaint written by the plaintiff?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they hope to prove.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it's what happened.
Okay.
All right, so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
All right.
What kind of policy limit you got?
We had 100,000.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she can't have that kind of damage from an accident like that. I mean, come on.
Okay.
If you want, what you should do is you should have a lawyer from the insurance company who's handling the suit. You could contact them and say, listen, I talked to this other lawyer on the radio. Throw that in, he'll love it. And he says, I'm supposed to just ask you, and he'll say, all right. But, realistically, how do you rate this claim in terms of bogusness, non-bogusness, realistically, before I go spend my own money on a lawyer?
Right.
And he may give you a little heads up on that.
I remember asking the first time when I asked, I guess their department when they called, I guess they offered her a settlement twice before, and she denied it.
Right.
So that's why they said, well, that's why we're going to fight this one, because it definitely we feel she's just looking for a payday.
Yeah, and they probably aren't going to get it.
Okay.
But you're in the crosshairs for the moment, so check that out for me. All right.
Okay. Hey, thanks, bud.
All right, brother. Bye. 540-0580. Dave, you're on the air.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, I just had a quick question about open container laws. If you were driving home from your local beer distributor in your neighborhood and the hops and barley was calling to you and you decided to pop a cold one and Officer Friendly pinched you, what's the most you could get into trouble for? Obviously one beer you wouldn't be drunk, but
I think open container law is up to a $300 fine. I think might be a $25 up to a $300, but no real trouble.
Well, see what caused me to call you and ask you about this was, I was watching this thing in the news about the breathalyzers, and they were interviewing the state police, and the guy said, well, we're going to take them in for blood tests now, $1.40, ma'am. And said, well, we can figure out all kind of other stuff going on in them, when we do the blood test.
Oh, yeah, when they do the blood test on you.
No.
And they said when they do the blood test on you, they'll pull, if they want, they'll send it to a lab, and they'll test you for every known substance. And if you have even 2 nanograms of metabolite of marijuana, the legislature says you're too metabolated to drive.
Yeah. But I was just wondering if they had an open, they caught you with an open container, and there's the case of beer sitting in your car. One's missing. They say, well, we're going to do a blood test on you.
Yeah, he might be able to get there. He might not be able to get there to an arrest. It's not going to be an arrestable offense, open container. But if he can articulate a reasonable suspicion of DUI, he can stop you, right? So you have to have some reason to stop you first.
Right.
Once he gets there, then he has to have probable cause to arrest you for DUI. I guess the fact that you're drinking one beer in the car, you could have thrown the other case that you just emptied out the window earlier.
Well, the thing I was worried about is, let's say they tell you $1.40. Let's say they tell you, well, we got to take you in for a blood test, and I say, you ain't taking blood out of me, pal.
And once you say no, you're going to lose your driver's license automatically.
Well, the downside of them having more intel would be more dangerous, I would think.
Well, it depends what you got in you, brother.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
But they definitely will wax you with a civil license loss.
Yeah. But they can't force you to, strap down to a gurney and draw your blood, can they?
Not unless they get a warrant.
Okay.
And they can draw it, but they got to have articulable basis to do that. And the warrant requires probable cause. The PennDOT civil license suspension only requires the officer have a reasonable basis. So I had a girl at her house. Officer knocks on the door and says, "Your neighbor says you were driving recently." She says, "No, I was here all day." He's like, "Well, I want you to come down and submit to a blood test because you appear like you've been drinking." And she said, "I've been in my house all day. No, thank you." They had suspended her license because he had a reasonable basis.
Yeah.
Somebody told him she was driving. He didn't observe it, and he didn't verify it. He didn't even talk to the neighbor. Just heard on a police report or something. Got to the house. She said, "No." Of course, my answer to her was, what was her mistake?
And she answered the door.
Thank you.
That's what I never do.
Thank you. She answered the door. Listen, if you're in the public somewhere and it comes across, Rob Smith, please come to security. Don't go to security. Send somebody else who's not you to find out why they want to talk to you.
Right.
Please come to your house. Don't let them in.
Absolutely.
All right, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Carl.
Bye. 540-0580. We'll be back after the break. Wow, I don't know what that was about. Okay, we're back. I'm just sitting here eating a Mrs. Stam's chicken, washing it down with a Diet Wild Cherry Pepsi to disappoint all my fans who think it should be a Belgian beer, apparently, based on Facebook. But yeah, I really like Mrs. Stam's in Carlisle. It's highly recommend it.
I agree. I second that.
It's some of the best chicken around. So anyhow, before I take some more callers, I did get a Facebook question about use of force to protect property or to drive off a nefarious individual. And the factual, scenarios can vary, but Pennsylvania does allow the use of force, the justifiable use of force, to defend property, but it cannot be deadly force. So now, you can use deadly force if somebody's breaking into your house and you feel they're going to, kill somebody or that sort of thing. But just to protect property is what we're talking about. You can't just use force. They're going to break your Ming vase or the Maltese Falcon or whatever, priceless artifact you happen to have on your mantle. If they're going to do that, you can't just shoot them dead. You can use force to try to stop them, though. It has to be reasonable in circumstance. Or somebody's over at your house, and you've asked them to leave repeatedly, and they've refused to leave. They've now become a trespasser. You may use limited physical force to remove the trespasser. Use of force justifiable for protection of property. Use of force upon or toward the person of another is justifiable when the actor believes such force is immediately necessary to prevent or terminate an unlawful entry or other trespass upon land or a trespass against or the unlawful carrying away of tangible movable property if such land or movable property is or is believed by the actor to be in his possession. The use of force is justified in this section only if the actor first requests the person against whom such force is used to desist from his interference with the property unless the actor believes that such a request would be useless, it would be dangerous to himself or others, substantial harm will be done to the physical condition of the property if they wait. And that sort of use of force can't be, again, deadly force. It has to just be ordinary force appropriate for the means. And the government would have to disprove that. So it is an available defense. So good luck. Let's see. Frost, you want to talk about marijuana?
Yes, I do.
What's going on?
Okay. Tell me how, if somebody smokes a joint a week ago and they get pulled over, say, just for whatever reason, they're not really driving erratic. It's more of just like, when it's after 11 o'clock, 1 out of 4 people are on something. So, it's lucky to draw a lot of times. And so the officer might think he might be under the influence.
Right.
Even though he doesn't smell nothing, he has no probable cause at all because he didn't smell nothing. We used to beat alcohol DUIs because when they would say they smelled alcohol doesn't have a smell.
Well, let me stop you for 1 second. They just had a police officer in a county, Franklin County, Pennsylvania, testify that the person's eyes appeared brown and that the brown tint in his eyes was consistent with marijuana smoking in his
Well, my eyes are gold. It even says that on my license. So I wonder what he would do then. So I guess because I have different, I'm very not average. Right away, you want to violate my rights and have me take a blood test.
So let me back up for 1 second. Let's assume that he has to have some shred of probable cause to arrest you, okay? And assume he even does. And when they test you, what do they find? They find couple nanograms of metabolite, right?
Right.
And that's only illegal because the legislature said this. So every time I hear somebody say, well, that, DUI is a real crime and, you guys defend it, how dare you? I always want to point out to them now that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, before 2004, in order to be DUI, you actually had to be intoxicated, or at least have a high enough blood alcohol level that you probably were intoxicated.
That's right.
There are
right. Go on. I'm sorry.
No, there are entire classes of DUI right now where people are going to jail. People are losing their licenses. Kids are going hungry because people can't pay their child support or feed their families that they're in intact families because they've got nothing other than some metabolite of an illegal drug in them, or even worse, some quantity of a prescription drug combined with like maybe a half cup of alcohol. And again, it doesn't have to impair you.
Right.
Or non. So anyhow, my point on it is, for all you people out there sitting in your car or your house right now who just want to sit around and judge everybody and go, I would never get a DUI, just those scumbags do, and they're a danger. You don't have to be a danger or a hazard to be a DUI in Pennsylvania any longer.
So if you just have a minute trace, see, that's what's so unfair about all this drug testing, Mr. Robinson, because at 90%, and it's a proven fact now with the statistics, because you always got to wait a year or two to really see what's going on in the country, that over 90% are marijuana for like people that come up hot at jobs.
Right.
It's not heroin. It's not cocaine. See, because they don't want to go after that stuff. Because they could have made a test a long time ago that could have told if they could have went a hair test. They could have went to a hair test with everybody. Atlantic City was doing hair tests in the 90s to be a car dealer. Why wasn't everybody else doing a hair test? Oh, you don't want to know if somebody's snorting a lot of coke now and then, because that was always considered kind of cool. Then crack came and coke got a bad name. That's the only reason cocaine got a bad name, because crack. Otherwise, it was the upper class. It was kind of considered cool. But marijuana, you're just this dirty Indian, or, like when I lived in New Mexico 5 years, boy, did I learn a lot of history about this country.
Right.
And so the people that get hurt, and those are the people, though, the marijuana people are usually the ones that have a job. The marijuana people will pay any fine because they just want to move on with their lives. And see, they're the ones that have took the brunt of all this drug testing. You wonder. And so when you have a legislature sitting up there promising billions of dollars that they can never pay, with the turnpike $7 billion in the hole, I mean, every other week we find out that somebody played the numbers game, which as far as I'm concerned is fraud. That's what I learned in college, but I guess that's different now.
Frost, let me remind you.
My point is, though, 2 nanograms, and that's a DUI.
That's a DUI, brother. Let me tell you something. Our last 3 presidents, right? We know that at least 2 of them did cocaine. We know that at least 2 of them did marijuana, and they're not the same 2, right?
Right.
My point is it's interesting because only in America will we run around and willy-nilly say that having a small amount of nanograms in you requires that you do this or that, or that you be punished this way or that. But it seems like the people are fit to be president, even though they did have some nanograms in them at one time.
Exactly. I'm wondering what Washington and Colorado, like, they really got a hard year ahead of them trying to figure out what they're going to do with their legislature with the laws.
If I was the governor of a state, and God bless the world, they'll never let me be, of course. But if I was, and my state chose to legalize marijuana, and the federal government tried to interfere with that, I would order my state police to arrest the federal agents.
Well, it's going to get ugly. I see it coming to. It depends on the economy. If the economy magically would pick up tomorrow and they start having revenue, the states, they'll probably stall, because
right.
we were promised in the year 2000, like 99, 2000. The Mennonite farmers growing tobacco, they can't sell the tobacco anymore. South America's wiping you out. And when you got to hold it for a year or two, if you can grow it a certain way, you can't do that. So Hawaii was given permission. I don't know who lives in Hawaii to grow marijuana, fit to grow hemp, not the smoky kind.
Right.
And then the legislature quietly agreed that they were going to let that happen here. Well, then 9/11 happened, and everything went out the window. And I'm wondering why that never got brought back up, because people are losing farms. You can grow hemp, and why can Hawaii do it but other states can't. I don't understand that. We're the United States of America. And under the Commerce Act, one state can't be told they can't do. You can't let one state do manufacture something and not allow another state.
Well,
under the Commerce Act, correct?
Well, no, though they can regulate interstate commerce, and I guess the Congress has declared that the only appropriate place to grow it is, way out in the Pacific Ocean where nobody's going to drive past it and ask what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what. When I see people living, friends in Denver area and stuff, and I see the money that they're putting back into their services for their teachers, their cops, their firefighters. You don't see people being laid off out there. The people with the medical marijuana, they're using that money. Well, a few of the states are anyway. And it's going right back. And instead of going in a slush fund to be used for whatever crazy program they might think of, it's being used to help out counties that are broke, where we don't want to lay off teachers and cops because you have chaos then in your city.
Let me just tell you one final thought here. I got to go to break, but while I like the idea of legalizing marijuana so we can tax it, I don't think we should be in the business of giving our government more money. So we got to figure that one out, because maybe we can be libertarians and just let people do what they want to do and not worry about taxing it. I got to go to break, brother.
Thank you very much.
They just use tax. Well, RomingerLaw.com is where you can learn a little bit more about us. 241-6070 is the office number, of course. And right here, if you want to talk live on the air and get your legal questions answered, we'll do it. 540-0580. And don't forget, at 2 o'clock, we're going to have Glenn Yoder of Coldwell Banker Select Professionals on the air. And he's going to talk to us about property management, rentals, real estate questions. So get those ready, because it's very practical. And if you know somebody that has a rental or had problems with rentals, wants to understand how to manage them, he's going to explain to us how that all works. Mary, you're on the air.
Okay.
What do you got, Mary?
I want to ask a question about LLC, about the purchase of LLC.
Okay.
Am I speaking to Mr. Rominger?
This is he. You're live on the air.
Okay. I would like to know, is the purchase of LLC, the benefits, is that across the board? Is that in every state the same?
No. A limited liability company, every state's a little different. I mean, exactly what it means. But generally speaking, they're a way of creating a corporate-style shield, so it's limiting your liability without having to create a stock company. So it's almost like a partnership. And sometimes you can have them treated as a partnership for tax purposes or as a corporation for tax purposes, depending. But that's something you have to work with your accountant on.
Well, if you purchased one out of state, then what?
Well, if you purchase one out of state, then you better be talking with your CPA about all the implications. See, when you buy a business, sometimes you don't want to buy the LLC. Sometimes you want to buy the assets of the LLC or the assets and liabilities. You don't want to actually buy the LLC because you may not be able to capture certain depreciation cycles and things like that for tax purposes. So the purchase of an LLC is something that should never be done lightly. I mean, now we're not talking about creating one. We're talking about purchasing one, right?
Pardon me?
You're talking about purchasing one, not creating
one.
one.
Yeah. Well, we have purchased one. My husband had purchased one.
Right.
And it wasn't here in this state. And I was reluctant to give my okay to this because of certain questions that came up to me.
And the other problem is, due diligence. If it's out of state, is it a business that is operating out of state, or is it something you can bring into the state? I'm just not sure. So I would want to sit down with a CPA, and I would want to sit down with a lawyer and say, here's what I'm buying, here's the terms of the agreement, and I would want my my business counsel and my CPA to explain to me exactly why or what the different options are and what the seller's willing to do. Some sellers aren't going to be willing to just sell the assets. They want to sell the whole company. Other people are going to want to sell the assets but not the company because they're just selling one product line, let's say. So you'd have to look at your agreements, and they're all very important.
Yes. Okay, my other question is, if you have real estate property that someone is purchasing a property from you, you are financing it, in other words, and they have their tax man, they want your Social Security. Are you responsible to give that to them?
So the other side is buying it from you.
Yes.
And you're carrying the paper on it.
Yes.
And they want your Social Security number because they want to 1099 you, probably.
I don't know, but I don't know.
For tax purposes, they need to report what they spent the money on.
Do we have to submit that?
I think that they have a I think they can W-9 you. So I think you do if you're. I mean, let me put it this way: they got a 1099 you.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Again, this is a CPA question, but the short answer is if you're in a business transaction, like I'll give you an example, a tax ID number, which could be your Social Security number, it can also be your employer identification number.
Mm-hmm.
Those are sometimes used in place of a Social Security if it's a business entity. But the idea is, if I spend money on a company, I've got a 1099 if I want to deduct it.
Oh.
In order to 1099, I have to have a tax ID number to tell the IRS who I gave the money to.
Yeah, well, we have a tax ID number.
And so, I'm saying if that's what you operate under and that's what he's paying to is that entity, they can use your tax ID number instead of your Social Security.
They can use our tax ID number instead of our social.
Right.
Okay.
If that's who they're paying it to, that business entity. See what I mean?
Well, they're paying it to us.
Right. So maybe it's not going to that business entity, so then it goes to your social, which is your tax identification number for an individual who doesn't have an employer identification number.
Yeah. Okay.
All right?
Okay. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Good luck. 540-0580. Lewis, you're on the air.
Hello, Carl.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I have an unemployment matter I wanted to ask you about. I recently lost my job. I was there 10 years. They wrote down on paper that they fired me for yelling at a guy.
Okay.
But then when it went to unemployment, which that's not why they fired me. The reason they fired me was because of what other people were saying. And they believed it, apparently, because they let me go.
Right.
Now, when I got my paperwork from unemployment, it states on there that they did not fire me for what they put in writing when they gave me my termination notice. Is there anything I can do about them buggers? You follow what I'm saying?
Well,
I mean, the place is like a sewing circle, and they're listening to what the rumors are and believing it.
Right.
And that's really why they fired me.
Your only remedy is unemployment.
Okay.
So that's where you're at.
Okay, that's what I thought.
All right, my friend.
All right, thanks.
Good luck. Yeah, in Pennsylvania, really your only remedies are unemployment unless they fired you because of race or religion or, one of the protected classes, age, those sorts of things. And you can get under the EEOC or one of those. Who have I got on line 2, Shane? I don't see a name on there. Aaron, you're on the air. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
No problem.
I'm 35, and I'm going back to school. Actually, I never finished anything, so I have an unusual question for you. Do you think this is a good economy and a good time to try to study law? I know it's going to be a huge investment for me, and I always said if my other career didn't work out, I wanted to be a lawyer, so I thought, well, maybe I should go that way.
Well, Shane was saying something, I think, during a break about you being on the line with that question, and he said he picked up a book on marketing for lawyers that started, the first line of the book is, no lawyers like their job. And I don't think that's completely true, but start with the proposition that about a third, I think, of the people end up in the profession, discover they don't like it, but they feel trapped because of their loans and things like that.
Right.
Keep in mind that right now we can hire lawyers cheaper than ever before because the economy stinks and because there seems to be 2 people graduating for every spot available right now.
Wow.
On the other hand, in a few years, that curve will pare back off, and so you never know.
Do you think the .com industry, where there's all these services online, is that invading?
A little bit, but here's the real reason. The real reason is the law schools have just been turning out too many students.
Okay.
And there's a money-making proposition for them. And remember, you have all these student loans and government-backed loans and Stafford loans, and there's law loans and all these sorts of things for graduate school. What happens is when the federal government guarantees cheap, easy money, the schools collect the cheap, easy money by graduating more students.
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to discourage you because, on the other hand, if you're in the top portion of the class, it's easier to get a job. If you're flexible about where you can go. In other words, a lot of people are like, I don't want to leave the 100-mile radius of where I grew up or something.
Right.
Well, then you're going to limit yourself. But if you're willing to go anywhere, then I don't think it's so bleak.
Okay.
So, I would tell you, though, the other thing is a lot of lawyers or a lot of people get a legal education don't become lawyers because it's just a way of learning to think. As engineers become very good thinkers because of their engineering training, a lot of lawyers become very critical thinkers as well. And engineers and lawyers don't think alike, but they can bring a discipline to problem solving that isn't always there if a person doesn't have the education. So, lawyers are always breaking things into facts and law, for instance, and separating the two. and good at compartmentalizing things and being more. Sometimes people consider us as cold because we're more analytical about things. I always like to tell clients, like, I understand you're upset, but you don't want me. They want me to be upset too about what happened. Like, you don't want me upset because I can't be calculating when I'm upset.
Right. That makes sense.
Right.
Well, I mean, right now I'm studying my bachelor's on communications because I figured that would be flexible, and then maybe going forward I might consider law school. But what's your opinion? Thank you.
I asked, by the way, when I was in college, I said, I'm thinking about going to law school. What should my major be? And they're like, whatever you can get your best grades in.
I think I heard something like that myself.
All right, my friend.
Thank you very much.
540-0580. Joe, you're on the air.
Hey, Carl.
Hey.
Joe, how you doing
Good.
today? Hey, I got a question for you regarding Public Schools Authority.
Yeah.
If a juvenile is arrested for a non-criminal act,
Okay.
can the school use the information of him being arrested against him in the school? In other words,
I think so.
Excuse me?
I think so.
Okay.
I see kids disciplined in school for things that happen outside of school.
Okay.
So, and U.S. Supreme Court sort of said that you can do that. Remember the bong hits for Jesus kid?
Yeah.
All right, my friend. I think that's the answer. 540-0580. When we get back, we're going to have Glenn Yoder on talking about all things property management, rental related. So get your questions and calls ready. Dan, Irene, hold on. We'll put you on in a minute. Meantime, go to romingerlaw.com if you want to find me. Office number is 241-6070, 241-6070. If you can hear the signal, we can help. Talk to you later.